Hello, welcome to Wondermous. My name's Merikay Hunt, and this is a podcast that talks about innovation, breakthroughs, and missions in healthcare. And we are interviewing some amazing leaders that are sharing their leadership journey in healthcare. So today I want to welcome David Franklin. David, why don't you share a little bit about you and your background and tell us about your organization that you're currently working with?
All right. Well, I've been in the nonprofit space really for over 30 years. Most of
Okay.
it was actually in the church world, working in churches,
Awesome.
and kind of went through some personal transition in my life. And I have had several family members, a father-in-law, multiple grandparents who battled the horrible disease that is Alzheimer's.
Mm,
And so it
wow.
just so happened the church where I had been serving for about 12 years was the home to the first ever Alzheimer's community care day center.
Wow.
Well, they were in the process of looking for a new CEO, and a board member of the church was serving as interim CEO. And he approached me and said, "Hey, I know you've been talking about transition in your life, and I think you'd be a perfect fit for this
Wow.
organization."
Oh, I got
So,
goosebumps when you said
yeah.
that. So when you transitioned, I'm curious, what do you feel like were some of your leadership qualities that they saw in you that they felt like would be a blessing to this organization?
Well, initially, it was simply that they had an organization that had been in existence for 29 years,
Mhm.
that was running pretty well, but they needed someone who could go and be the face and the voice of the organization, who was comfortable
Mm,
going out in the community and talking about this. And we're an outstanding organization, and people just didn't know about us and didn't
mhm.
know that we provide all these resources to families who are battling Alzheimer's or related dementia at little to no cost. And so
Sure.
that
And
message needed
David,
to get out.
absolutely. Share with our audience where you're located.
Our headquarters is in West Palm Beach, and
Okay.
we have day centers everywhere from Boca Raton, is farther south, to Fort Pierce, and we're kind of launching a new adventure. We're actually in the process of opening a center in Tampa and going
Okay.
over to the west coast of Florida as well.
Okay. And when you were doing this leadership transition, and the reason I want to sort of hover here for a little bit is
Mhm,
I think there's a lot of people that are hesitant to take that leap of faith.
mhm.
And, it's scary and you have to lean in. In fact, I was talking to a consultant yesterday who's in one of the leadership classes I'm teaching virtually, and she's working with a dentist who is supposed to buy a practice, and he's dragging his feet
Yeah.
because he's scared. He's been working with her for 2.5 years. And so, what would you say to somebody to really help them find the courage and the strength to face their fears, lean in, and make a big change in a transition?
Yeah, and I think that was the most difficult part for me is, okay, hey, this is so different from what I've
Right.
done. There's a lot of crossover and skills and abilities, but it was completely different. And I even had doubts at first. I remember my first ever board meeting here at Alzheimer's Community Care um, was approving a budget to lose $2 million my first year,
Oh, my word.
which I was like thinking to my buddy who thought this would be a great fit for me is you didn't want to approve that budget. You wanted someone else to do it.
He wanted you to
But
do it.
I think sometimes you just you have to trust that voice, that inner voice, which, to me, I believe is God speaking to me.
Sure.
But it's trusting that voice that says, "Hey, uh, you should do this. You can
Mm,
do this,"
mm,
and making that leap of faith,
mhm,
and knowing, to me, what I'd heard and researched and known about the organization was that they had a great team. And
mhm,
so to me, the really first thing I did is to say, "Hey, I wanna invest in this team. I wanna
mhm,
pour into them. I
mm,
can only do so much."
right.
The leader gets the majority of the credit and the majority of the blame when things go good or bad, but the reality is it's all about the team.
Mm,
And so the more I can pour into my team, my key leaders, and they can pour into their people, the more successful we're gonna be as an organization. And I think that holds true in any kind of field.
absolutely. So what is it about your team? I like to call them points of difference. What
Mhm.
is it about your team's characteristics or qualities that really make them stand out?
I think it's the heart. It's caring. You know, um, I always say no one gets into a field, especially in the nonprofit realm, because they just think, hey, I would like this job.
Mhm.
They get into it because they care about people,
Right,
and
right.
knowing that at the heart of our organization, we wanna support those battling dementia and the caregivers that are
Mhm.
providing the support for them at home.
Mhm.
Because when we were founded 29 years ago, the statistic was if you were a spouse caring for a loved one with dementia,
Mhm.
75% of the time the caregiver would actually pass away first.
Mm.
And so I
Wow.
think that's overlooked in this is, hey, it's not just about the patient or the participant in our services. It's about the entire family and what they're
Mhm.
walking through and going through.
And my memory is not that great. We're working on that. But were you the one that told me about elderly orphans when we had a conversation? Is that a term that y'all are using with some of these people that don't have support in some of their territories?
It's not a term that we use particularly, but we do operate as something we call it the Live Alone program because there
Okay.
are there are seniors that are alone and they don't have the support. And
Right,
so
right,
in that instance, we're not we are trying to be the caregiver because there is no caregiver for these folks. So, but I
right.
love that term, elderly orphans, because that's really what's going on. And and if you've ever been around someone with dementia, that's why we've started programs like our wandering mitigation program. We worked with the state of Florida to actually help write the Silver Alert law, which
Okay.
is which
Oh,
is when a
wow.
car goes wandering on the highway and you
Yeah.
notify people. But more often than that, actually, is when someone just wanders out the front door and they forget
Mm,
where they're going or don't know, or it's the middle of the night and they think they're going to work like they did for so much of their career. And when those folks
right.
are alone and no one notices they're missing, it's especially dangerous.
Hmm. Well, and that triggered a thought for me of best practices. I joke
Mhm.
sometimes when I'm speaking that in my 30s, I lost my eyesight. In my 40s, my energy level shifted. In my 50s, my brain's not working as well. But when we think of best practices from a leadership perspective, what do you think are some of your best practices that are helping give you that edge right now?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to the team and your people. Um, I could spend a lot of my day making decisions and trying to run the organization and kind of have a business mindset,
Mm-hmm.
or I can spend the majority of my time. I'm always going to have to do those things, or
Sure.
I could spend the majority of my time pouring into people.
Mm,
And when I pour into my leadership team and even, people in the accounting office that maybe aren't dealing with patients directly, every little bit of that to me is so much more effective because what you're doing is you're multiplying your efforts.
right.
When you
I
pour
sense that
Yeah.
I sense that you have strong communication skills, empathy, and the ability to listen. Would you agree with that?
I try to. I try to be good at listening. I think that's an important skill. As a lot of our grandparents or parents would have told us, "Hey, God gave you 2 ears and one mouth. Use them in that frequency."
Exactly. So, who are some people that influenced you in your career journey, a mentor or a leader?
Oh goodness, there's so many people that I can look at in different capacities, and I think there's a gentleman. I was working in Atlanta for a while, and there was a gentleman named Al Frey, and he told me, "Hey, a lot of good leaders are good at seeking out a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
but he said the reality is you need a mentor in every aspect of your life." You need a
Mm,
relationship mentor, you need a business mentor, you need
mm,
a spiritual mentor, you need, and all those a physical mentor for your health and wellness, and so to look at people and sometimes those people are people I'd read,
right.
I would call John Maxwell a mentor. I've met him a handful of times, but, I've read almost all of his 100 books that he's written. So, you can get sometimes mentored that way as well, by
Sure.
people just by soaking up the wisdom that they have to offer.
Absolutely. I'm a John Maxwell fan too. I heard him speak at High Point University, and one of the fascinating things about John is that he started his career as a pastor.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think too, what's inspiring to me about that is, it's okay not to have all the answers. And I think that's what is encouraging to me about your journey is that you're really making this not about you, not about the business, but it's about the team. And when you make it about the team, then everybody wins. So, what's a time in your life that you learned a valuable lesson that helped attribute to some of the qualities and characteristics that you possess today?
That's a great question. I think early on, I was working as a pastor, and I had a leader. I was at a very large church outside of Atlanta, and I had a leader who I thought was just an incredibly gifted leader.
Mhm.
And I noticed that anytime someone tried to give him credit, he would deflect it to someone else.
Wow.
He would either credit his chief of staff, he would credit his wife, he would credit and I just, to me, that struck a chord
Mhm.
because, there's athletes and movie stars and they succeed and they pound their chest and they put up a number one.
Right.
And then there's the kind of person that will receive that same credit and point it and direct it to someone else. And so I in that moment, I really thought, I wanna be the kind of person that's gonna deflect that to someone else.
Mhm. Well, and one of the things I share in my professional development classes when I'm teaching is we're an accumulation of every single thing that has ever happened to us in our entire life. And if we really want to get to the core of who we can become, sometimes we have to peel back those layers of
Absolutely.
negative experiences or failures or disappointments or whatever and just sort of shake that off and let that go. And I know for me personally, my faith walk has given me strength and courage and purpose to do that. So how has your faith played a role in your career journey?
Wow, this is another great question. I I think 2 words that stick out to me are grace and love.
Mm,
I'm as a follower of Jesus, I look at the life that he lived and the people that he chose to come around him. He invested in 12 people, and really poured into them, and they weren't the A team. They weren't the kind of people that would anyone else would have chosen. But
right,
then he poured into them and poured into them and developed them into, a group of people that no matter what your faith background, you can't deny that this group of 12 people built this massive religion,
right.
worldwide. And so I think that, you know, that always struck me is know, not simply just recognizing the faults in people, but giving them the grace and loving them to the point where they can be a better version of themselves.
I love that. So, I mentioned to you before we started recording that my sister, who is a former oncology nurse, had a knee replacement a couple days ago. So, I've been trying to be her caregiver, and it was interesting because she gave me this bracelet as a gift, and
Mm-hmm.
it has the word "strong" on it. And
Okay.
then she gave me like four scriptures that go to it, and it was about having your armor on and just being willing to face the day, right? And just to know that you can lean on somebody else. You don't have to do it all yourself. And I think that's one of the things that leaders need to understand is that you cannot do it all by yourself. You are
Absolutely.
an excellent testament to that. And so, what would you say to that leader that's really burning out or they are trying to do too many things and they're not as grounded as they should be? What advice would you give to them?
I think too often people that rise to a leadership position, the type of personality that is attracted to that, um, when we get busy, we'll just buckle down and try to grind it out. And the
Mhm.
reality is, it's a well stated thing, and they tell you it every time you get on an airplane. Put your own oxygen mask on first,
Yeah.
and we've got to feed and fuel ourselves. And so pouring into investing in yourself, I think is tremendously valuable. The
Mhm.
better version of myself I'm going to be, the more I'm going to have to offer to my family, to my company, to my friendships, to my staff and team. And so it's really, I think, pouring into yourself. Um, the tendency is to do that less when you feel overwhelmed, but that's when you got to
Mhm.
double down.
Absolutely.
That's when you got to double down. And I know from personal experience, at times I try to grind it out, I hit that wall. And the
Mm.
times that I stop and pray and reset my mindset and fill myself first, those are the times that the jobs just seem easier.
Oh, I love that. And in fact, this morning, I did a post on LinkedIn about being wise
Mhm,
and stopping to breathe and really assess what we're doing. And um, you made me think about a conversation I'm going to have this afternoon with an emergency room physician who is suffering from burnout. And so,
mhm.
work life integration is real for people. You invest in yourself and really listen to that. But what are some other strategies that you use so that you have some work life counterbalance or integration?
That the whole work life thing I do think is so important. Um, but I'm firm believer in it, when you rise to a leadership level, it's hard to turn it off.
Right.
I mean, and so how do I integrate what I do into my life
Mhm.
as opposed to shutting it off and stopping. And so when it becomes part of who you are and not just what you do, I think first of all that's when you've found a calling and not a job.
Nice.
And
Yes.
also that's when it doesn't feel so much like work. And so the balance just kind of happens naturally. And
Okay,
I do.
so here's a question for
Yeah.
you, David. When you're on
Mhm.
vacation, do you turn your phone off?
I don't, but I'm very intentional about when I'll answer and when I won't. There's times
Good. So you have some boundaries.
if I'm having dinner with my wife, I will not answer the phone even if it rings. Now I might call someone back afterwards, but I will not. So it's just I think it's prioritizing that. And also, here's the other thing: when you pour into your team and when you empower them, I actually just was on my honeymoon. Last week I
Oh,
was in Curacao.
congratulations.
And so before that, I spent some extra time with my team and my leadership team. And I said, listen, if you need to call me, call me. If something comes up. But when I pour into them, they didn't need to call me.
Mm.
They didn't need to call me because they felt empowered and equipped
Mhm.
to make the decisions that need to be made to do what they need to be doing. And sometimes it's them having that confidence and trust in themselves and you
Absolutely.
showing them that you have that in them. So sometimes my team might make a decision and I might not completely agree with it.
Mhm.
And so I'll roll with it simply because I want them to feel ownership and the power to make those decisions instead of me
Absolutely.
coming in and just overruling and doing whatever I say we need to do. So,
No, I like that. A colleague yesterday has had some health issues and she's got a new consulting role with a new firm. And she said, Mary Kay, I've had to commit to having hard stops.
mhm,
And I thought about that because, some of us are recovering workaholics, right?
sure.
Well, I normally don't email people at night because I like to unplug in the evenings as well. However, because of the jumbled schedule of late with caregiving, I wanted to respond to people because I kind of like the within 24, 48 hours if possible. But I share that because I think some people have a very difficult time saying no.
Yeah.
And so what would you encourage people about that for setting some boundaries and being able to say no confidently?
Hmm. I that's another great question. I'm in a group called C12 and it's a group of CEOs that are people of faith but also run organizations. Some of them are nonprofits like myself. And then there are
Mhm.
a wide variety of uh, fields, so to
Mhm.
speak. And but the one thing that we do is we learn from each other and we teach each other.
Mm.
And one of the things that I found in this group and it just in life is sometimes we overwork and sometimes we always say yes and commit to things because something is going on in another aspect of our life that we're trying to
Mhm.
avoid.
Interesting.
And so I think when you work on those other aspects of your life, it's easy to become a workaholic when your family life is not going well because you don't want to be there. You're avoiding.
Wow.
You
Right.
know? And so to be able to say no, I think a lot of comes down to being healthy in all the aspects of your life and
Mhm.
to be able to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm not gonna do this because I've got a higher calling or priority at this moment."
Mm. Nice.
Mhm.
Excellent. So as we come in for a close soon, I'm curious, if you could talk to your younger self
Mm.
and give yourself some words of wisdom or encouragement, David, what would you say?
You can do it.
Mm,
You can do it. I'm a person that has struggled at times in my life with being insecure about my
mm,
own ability.
mhm.
And I think to just be able to pour into my younger self and say, hey, you can do this.
Yeah.
God's going to use you to do great things. You just have to have the confidence to go and step that foot out and do it.
Absolutely. I love
Mm.
that. And I was sharing with someone recently that I don't think I could have survived all the personal trauma, the personal change, the business transformation change, the health changes in the last several years without the groundiness of faith. So I'm honored and thankful that you were willing to share some of your faith journey and your business journey with us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So, again, my name is Merikay Hunt, founder of Coach MK Companies, and we are dedicated to creating catalysts for change to help people unlock their true leadership potential. Learn more about me at coachmk.com. Blessings to you and make every day count.